China is lashing out.
China deploying fighter jets.
China's military buildup is astonishing.
Beijing says Taiwan is a part of China.
Taiwan is today living under the threat of an invasion from China. Xi Jinping has mentioned that Taiwan reunification remains China's most important international commitment. In 2019, he said, "We make no promise to abandon the use of force and retain the option of taking all necessary measures." China has not acted on these tenets so far. Amongst other factors that have blocked China from making a move on Taiwan, the presence of US military in the South China Sea is a big one. US has been working with its allies to counter any offensive from China by establishing military bases across multiple locations right at China's doorstep. Most recently, USA announced plans to expand with 4 new military sites in Philippines via an agreement. So how did the US story flip from being a British colony in the 18th century to a 21st century superpower? How does it possess the ability to influence countries across the Pacific and Atlantic so effectively and keep threats like China and Russia in check? Following the Declaration of Independence issued on the 4th of July in 1776, the 13 American colonies severed their political connections to Great Britain to form the United States of America. This new country now needed to figure out their foreign policy, one which would ensure they do not get entangled with the great European powers. In 1815, Napoleon was defeated in Waterloo, and a series of diplomatic meetings followed in Europe to discuss a new political layout so that major European powers could resize through new boundaries and balance each other while maintaining peace. On the other side of the globe, the young country of United States and its President James Monroe's administration became concerned about these imperial European powers and their interference in the affairs of the newly independent Latin American states or potential US territories. Old powers of Europe posed the greatest obstacle to economic expansion for the US. So the US government articulated a new policy in 1823, the famous Monroe Doctrine. It made 4 basic points. USA would not interfere in the internal affairs of European powers. USA recognized and would not interfere with existing European colonies in the Western Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere was close to net new colonization, and any attempt by a European power to oppress or control an independent nation in the Western Hemisphere would be viewed as a hostile act against the United States. Essentially, the independent lands in the Western Hemisphere would be solely US's domain. The Monroe Doctrine followed a massive acquisition for the United States in 1803, the territory of Louisiana. This was an important goal for President Thomas Jefferson, who was keen to gain control of the crucial Mississippi River. The Louisiana Purchase extended US's sovereignty across the Mississippi, nearly doubling the size of the country. In less than 2 decades, USA annexed huge areas in the southwest, while signing treaties with UK in the northwest, helping it expand its area from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The land-hungry Americans used treaties to displace local Indians from their tribal lands, and in cases where this failed, they violated both treaties and Supreme Court rulings. The US also purchased Alaska in 1867 from Russia, from a then price of just $7.2 million. From 1895 to 1898, Cuban revolutionaries had been fighting to gain independence from the Spanish colonial rule. The conflict captured the attention of the Americans because of the economic and political instability that it produced in a region within such geographical proximity. This also coincided with the long-held American interest in clearing the Western Hemisphere of European colonial powers. So after an American battleship exploded and sank in Havana under mysterious circumstances in 1898, USA and Spain went to war. Spain lost the war and signed a treaty with the US, which not only compelled the Spanish to relinquish claims on Cuba, but it also required Spain to give up Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. USA also used the war as a pretext to annex the independent state of Hawaii. And suddenly, USA was a colonial power with overseas dependencies. And under the guise of liberating these countries from European colonialism, it basically just replaced them. Let's take a pause and reflect on how all the land acquisitions came together to create the USA we know. Tactically, it is comforted by 2 enormous oceans on either side, which make it almost impossible to consider an invasion. For context, Hitler had to cancel the Third Reich's plans to invade UK, despite it being just 32 kilometers across the English Channel. In comparison, the shortest distance between USA and France is roughly 5,000 kilometers. To the north and south of the continent are countries which have neither the intent nor the wherewithal to develop into a power that could compete with the US. Amongst USA's key acquisitions, Mississippi River Basin has been vital to the nation's economy. It is the world's longest navigable river and contributes to power generation, agricultural irrigation, and industrial production. The river facilitates smooth trade and movement of goods through boats and ships, not only within the country, but also through the ocean into the global markets. Other acquisitions like California and Texas have led to unprecedented results as well. In terms of GDP per state, California and Texas are ranked first and second respectively within the country. In fact, with a GDP of $3.6 trillion, if California were a country, it would rank as the fourth largest in the world today, leaving behind India, UK, France, and Russia. Recently, USA was able to unlock shale oil production with a new fracking technology, helping it become the #1 producer of oil in the world, surpassing Saudi Arabia and Russia. This has made the US an energy-independent nation without relying significantly on any imports. Let's continue and look at some of the other factors that have helped the American growth journey. As the Second World War was not fought on US soil, the country emerged from the war in a much stronger position than Europe. Providing military equipment to the Allies during the Second World War greatly boosted the US economy. By 1945, USA was manufacturing more than half of the goods produced in the world, and the US held roughly 2/3 of the available gold reserves. Emerging from the Second World War as a leading power, the US launched the Marshall Plan in 1948, which was a $13 billion undertaking to help rebuild the war-torn cities in Europe.
To save Europe from this disaster, General George C. Marshall, the United States Secretary of State, in 1947 made a dramatic appeal to the people of Europe. If they would work together, the United States would supply the money for food and raw materials essential to recovery.
By investing in the reconstruction of countries devastated by the Second World War, USA created new markets to export American goods. Products like Coca-Cola became desired commodities abroad and helped promote the exportation of US culture. The Marshall Plan served as a conduit for the spread of capitalism across Western Europe, while also hindering the power and influence of the Soviet Union beyond the Eastern Bloc. Up until the Second World War, all the major countries in the world followed the monetary system known as a gold standard, which basically meant that the value of a country's currency was linked to physical gold. Put crudely, you could walk into a central bank with a paper note and convert it for an equivalent value in physical gold. The gold standard ensured that a country does not print banknotes beyond the threshold of gold reserves that they are actually carrying. However, with unprecedented spending requirements during the Second World War, the gold standard became irrelevant. Countries ignored the framework and continued to pump money into the system to support defense expenditure. Realizing the challenge with the gold standard, after the Second World War, 44 countries gathered in Bretton Woods, USA, to align on a new monetary system. During the conference, countries agreed on an international regime which involved pegging every other currency in the world to the US dollar, while the US dollar would be pegged to gold, guaranteeing the convertibility of the US dollar. This new system meant that every country would need to hold dollar reserves to conduct trade between themselves, a system which enabled the dollar to become the reserve currency and rise to the level of prominence at which it could be used as a weapon if needed. Another significant after effect of the Second World War was the formation of NATO in 1949.
Between France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Norway, Denmark, Italy, Portugal, Iceland, Canada, and the United States.
And while NATO operates on the principle of collective defense, and decisions are typically made collectively, due to its significant military and political influence within the alliance, USA has played a key role in shaping NATO's policies and actions.
The Council agreed that if it is determined that this attack was directed from abroad against the United States, it shall be regarded as an action covered by Article 5 of the Washington Treaty.
The Cold War decade saw some inexplicable interventions by the US to ensure it proactively blocked any opportunity for countries to lean towards communism. Guatemala, Syria, Iraq, Cambodia, Bolivia, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Nicaragua, Vietnam. From Operation Cyclone to Operation Condor, the list of US interventions goes on. US dominance has seen it openly or secretly intervene to fabricate governments aligned with its own ambitions for global superiority. In some ways, USA won the Cold War because it was more brutal and tough-minded in controlling and intimidating people much more effectively than the Soviet Union. Today, the US is home to some of the biggest companies in the world, and it is impossible to imagine a normal functioning day for a common person anywhere on the planet without the existence of these companies or their products and services. No other country in the world produces such high quality of innovation to impact society at a similar scale. USA has also mastered the art of influencing without authority, as entertainment and pop culture remain one of its biggest exports. Entertainment around the world is dominated by American-made products. Oscars and Grammy remain the coveted prize for artists and creators worldwide. There is a reason why students from across the world want to study in an Ivy League school in the US. New York Times and Washington Post are widely considered by many to be some of the best news sources in the world. And all of this plays a big part in how we perceive the American story. While soft power and ideals are aimed at influencing the mind, perception, and preference, USA relies on tangible hard power to enforce its vision for the world. Today, the US has the highest military budget in the world, with an allocation of $816 billion for 2023. This figure is almost 4 times China's own military budget and higher than the entire GDP of Switzerland. As the world evolves into a more tech-driven battlefield, US is preparing for it accordingly. The lifeline of the modern economy, semiconductors are the brains of every electronic device and system, from iPhones to toasters, from data centers to credit cards, and very crucially, these chips also enable the production of state-of-the-art military weapons. To strengthen domestic semiconductor capacity and counter China, USA launched the CHIPS Act in October of 2022. It directs $280 billion in spending over the next 10 years to encourage American companies to build new chip manufacturing plants in the US, while also prohibiting them from producing certain types of chips in Russia and China if they are awarded subsidies under the Act.
If we don't do this, I don't think there'll be another chip manufacturing facility built in America.
As evident, a crucial part in America's storyline moving forward would be countering China. The recent National Security Strategy document released by the Biden administration outlines this explicitly. If China were to annex Taiwan, it would be able to limit the US military's operations in the region, and subsequently its ability to defend its Asian allies. The allies could lose confidence in their partnership with the US, and to figure out their own security, such allies would contemplate either accommodating China or growing their own military. Either outcome would result in diminished US influence. No reasonable person could deny the great things that United States did in the 20th century, or the fact that many countries prospered in successful alliances with Washington. But as we move deeper into the 21st century, the world is discovering a darker side of the American hegemony and what that means for its sustenance. One could argue that the current world order was constructed with brutality, and that is precisely why it is so brittle and shaky. Regardless of how we choose to perceive the US mental model, it is hard to refute that no other country in the history of modern civilization has dominated the world quite like the US. The US could not have grown to become the superpower it is today without the exceptional creativity and hard work of its people, along with the political foresight of its founding fathers. Cynics could argue that the American exceptionalism is a myth, and that USA was lucky to have been founded far from the great European powers, which were fighting amongst themselves, allowing the US to expand across the continent. But luck alone would not have brought an 18th century colony to become the most powerful nation this world has ever seen. We must give credit where it is due. USA has enjoyed the position of an undisputed global superpower for close to a century now, but countries like China are knocking on the door. The coming years will be crucial in determining how much longer the US can extend its dominance.
Let me tell you something. The United States of America is the most powerful nation on earth. Period. Period. It's not even close.